Trump just approved a $300 million weapons package for Ukraine. France and the UK just signed a new nuclear deal, bypassing NATO entirely. And Russia? It's watching, arming, and moving. These aren't isolated moves. They're part of a shift, a realignment, that could fracture the West's military cohesion when it's needed most. And while we debate elections and headlines, the nuclear world order is quietly being rewritten. In the next few minutes, we'll break down what's happening, what it means, and why the next 6 months may define the next 20 years. While most headlines focus on Trump's legal battles and campaign rallies, a far more strategic and far less covered move is now unfolding. Trump has quietly backed a $300 million military aid package to Ukraine, but this isn't a typical aid plan. It's being structured to move fast, with minimal consultation and outside traditional NATO pathways. That alone is a statement. But what truly matters is how it's being executed. The package includes high-precision munitions, anti-armor systems, surveillance drones, and battlefield sensors, gear typically reserved for coordinated NATO efforts, not unilateral transfers. These aren't leftovers from Pentagon stockpiles. They're mission-critical assets being prioritized based on American assessment alone. According to defense analysts, some of these systems, like GPS-guided artillery or encrypted battlefield communications, require real-time data integration. That means U.S. boots on the ground, either physically or through satellite networks, enabling their use. Which raises the question, is this just support for Ukraine or an embedded escalation strategy? Now here's where it gets more politically charged. Normally, a package like this would pass through NATO review or congressional debate. But Trump, in coordination with select Republican defense officials, is using executive discretion and pre-approved funds from previous emergency authorizations to bypass formal votes. Legally, it's sound. The mechanisms were designed for wartime flexibility. But strategically, it's a signal. When alliances slow down action, strong states will act alone. This is more than a tactical pivot. It's a strategic rehearsal. It suggests a future in which the United States, or any power, could sidestep consensus and move independently when it deems the threat urgent enough. And that future isn't hypothetical. It's already here. We're seeing it play out in real time. NATO was built on coordination and deterrence. But what happens when deterrence isn't fast enough? Trump's maneuver shows exactly what that looks like, a doctrine of pre-consensus action. And whether you support or oppose it, the consequences are global. What makes this more significant is that it didn't happen in a vacuum. Just as the US moves unilaterally, France and the UK, Europe's only two nuclear powers, have signed a new strategic partnership focused specifically on nuclear modernization and joint deterrence. But what matters isn't just that they signed it, it's how and where they did it, entirely outside of NATO command structures. To understand why this matters, we need to go back to the concept of nuclear burden sharing inside NATO. Since the Cold War, the alliance has relied on the idea that deterrence isn't just about capability, it's about credibility through coordination. In theory, if one member is attacked, all respond. In practice, that means shared planning, shared systems, and integrated response chains. But France has always been the exception. Since the 1960s, Paris has maintained its force de frappe, an independent nuclear arsenal, specifically to avoid over-reliance on US command. The UK, while more integrated historically, has also kept critical parts of its submarine-based deterrent under sovereign control. This new pact signals something deeper, a deliberate move toward a dual deterrence model. One path follows NATO's collective doctrine, the other follows national survival logic. And by committing to joint nuclear upgrades outside NATO, France and the UK are acknowledging, even if silently, that the alliance may not be able to act fast or cohesively enough when it matters. It's not a break from NATO, but it is a hedge against its failure. In strategic terms, it's the nuclear version of We'll handle it ourselves if we have to. That mistrust isn't paranoia, it's built on signals. France's Macron has repeatedly stated that Europe needs strategic autonomy, a polite way of saying, we can't count on the US forever. At the same time, Washington is sending weapons through back channels, reinforcing Poland, and talking openly about Russia's potential to strike NATO territory. The alliance is splintering, not politically, but tactically, and Russia sees it. Now look east. While the West debates funding and cohesion, Russia and China are building something more dangerous: synchronization. Over the past year, the two nations have conducted at least 7 joint military exercises, not symbolic flyovers, but operational simulations designed to test real wartime scenarios. In one set of drills off the coast of Vladivostok, Russian and Chinese naval forces practiced coordinated blockade maneuvers, shutting down maritime access routes in contested zones. The target? Hypothetical third-party interference, a thinly veiled reference to U.S. and Allied deployments in the Pacific and Arctic. In other operations, they've simulated simultaneous cyber disruption across multiple continents. These drills include mock electronic interference with satellite uplinks, jamming of maritime navigation systems, and coordinated air defense activation against drones and low-altitude hypersonics. And most importantly, they are testing command autonomy, the ability to respond in seconds without centralized coordination, using AI-guided systems and predefined protocols. Why now? Because timing is everything. Russia and China routinely schedule these exercises to align with critical tensions: a new NATO deployment in Europe, a U.S. arms delivery to Taiwan, a G7 meeting. They are broadcasting readiness not just to each other, but to their adversaries. And the geography matters. These aren't happening in empty deserts or frozen seas. They're staged near choke points: Kaliningrad, the East China Sea, the Kuril Islands, zones where conflict wouldn't just be likely, it would be devastating. This isn't about war games. It's about coordination under pressure. And every new drill shortens the response time, hardens the alliance, and signals one thing: they won't wait for the West to decide what to do. Iran is also watching. While the West focuses on Eastern Europe, Tehran has been deepening military coordination with Russia, especially in drone technology and radar disruption systems. Intelligence sources suggest there's ongoing testing of satellite interference capabilities aimed at disabling Western GPS clusters. Why does this matter? Because in any future war, the first 30 minutes won't be fought with tanks. They'll be fought in the electromagnetic spectrum, satellites, power grids, communications. If you lose that battle, you lose control before a single missile lands. Let's pause here. The big picture isn't about whether France signs a treaty or Trump funds Ukraine. It's about the pattern. Major powers are preparing for rapid independent action because they expect the system to fail. The system, in this case NATO, was built for consensus. But consensus is slow, and war moves fast. Back to the US. Analysts inside the Pentagon are increasingly focused on what they call strategic decoupling, a process where nations keep the alliance for optics, but prepare to act without it. That's what France is doing. That's what the UK is signaling. And Trump? He's already doing it. Meanwhile, there's another front that's accelerating all of this: artificial intelligence. Several defense briefings now highlight AI as a first strike multiplier. That means whichever side integrates AI faster into targeting, satellite analysis, and cyber defense gains a preemptive edge and potentially the incentive to strike first. China's already simulating AI-driven invasion models over Taiwan. Russia is testing autonomous swarm drones along its western borders. The US is behind in some aspects, ahead in others, but the race is real, and it's happening now. Here's where it gets more strategic. If AI gives one side a 15-minute lead in targeting or detection, that can break the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. The whole nuclear peace we've had since the Cold War was based on both sides being equally vulnerable. But if one side believes it can blind the other even for a few minutes, the logic changes. You move from deterrence to temptation, and that's the most dangerous shift of all. So where does all this leave us? With Trump arming Ukraine outside NATO, France and the UK building nuclear plans on their own, and major powers treating alliances like theater while preparing for chaos. What used to be considered fringe strategy, like acting without Article 5 or launching limited strikes without consensus, is now being war-gamed openly. And here's the paradox. The more the system weakens, the more each actor arms itself, prepares itself, and isolates itself, which in turn accelerates the collapse of the system. NATO isn't dying, it's becoming symbolic. And symbolism doesn't stop missiles. If both fronts open, Taiwan and Eastern Europe, the West won't just face a military challenge. It will face a systemic fracture. Ukraine collapsing under renewed Russian offensives would stretch NATO logistics beyond breaking. At the same time, if China launched a real-time assault on Taiwan, U.S. naval and air capabilities would split across oceans, diluting strength, slowing response, and creating dangerous gaps in deterrence. But the greater risk isn't just military. It's infrastructural. It's domestic. A two-front war wouldn't just stress alliances. It would collapse coordination. Key technologies, microchips from Taiwan, energy routes through Eastern Europe, rare earths from contested zones would vanish from global markets overnight. Supply chains would jam. Energy prices would spike. And communication networks, already strained by cyber interference, could buckle under targeted attacks. The result? Not just recession, but functional paralysis in sectors like food, logistics, healthcare, and even digital infrastructure. Domestically, the U.S. would face the impossible task of projecting force globally while maintaining stability internally. With elections approaching, political divisions would harden. Every foreign move would be weaponized by domestic factions. Every delay seen as betrayal. Trust in institutions, already frayed, would snap. It's not just war. It's war without unity. And that's the most dangerous scenario of all. A world where conflict breaks out not between enemies, but inside alliances. Where the threat isn't just invasion, but indecision. Where victory is no longer measured in firepower, but in cohesion. And in that sense, the West is already showing cracks. This isn't tomorrow's risk. It's today's momentum. And while missiles haven't yet launched, policies are shifting, doctrines are bending, and trust is evaporating. War doesn't need consensus, but peace does. If you're still watching, you're not here for noise. You're here for clarity. And clarity is power. Subscribe to Safety Zone and don't let headlines shape your reality.